Hey there, cool fans. Phil here, and I'm with Dave, and we're going to be talking about and reviewing the newest DC limited series event, Doomsday Clock. Also, it's the sequel to Watchmen. Today, we're going to have a different yet slightly similar format to what we've done before. In this particular case, we're going to have 1 minute to set what our expectations of the book are going to be, another minute to review the book, and finally, 1 minute to conclude what our future expectations of the book are going to be and our general thoughts on it overall. Okay, so my overall expectations for Doomsday Clock as a sequel to Watchmen. For one, I wasn't really sure when I first heard about this. I wasn't really sure what to expect. I mean, a sequel to Watchmen. Did anyone really think that was possible? Yes. There were questions that people thought about with the ending of Watchmen that could be followed up on, but here's the thing. Watchmen is a DC comic. Yes, it was published by DC, but it was also created by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. And when you think about Watchmen, you can't help but think about how DC ultimately treated Moore and Gibbons, screwing them out of the rights to Watchmen. And DC thinking, oh, we have the rights to Watchmen, we can do whatever we want with it. And we saw how that turned out with Before Watchmen, a slew of prequel miniseries that didn't really have any overall end point. And what I'm hoping, and I guess what I'm hoping for with Doomsday Clock is that since this is going to be a 12-issue series, I'm hoping that it will tell a story from beginning to middle and end and have an overall end point.
For Watchmen come from both as a comic book fan and consumer of the movie. First and foremost, I want to know what happened to Walter Kovacs, or Rorschach. At the end of the book, at the end of the movie, his place in the timeline remains suspect at best. However, no character in comic books truly ever passes on, which brings me to my other expectation. Knowing the power of Superman, how do you kill a Kryptonian? Unless the characters are able to somehow subdue the Man of Steel, I think there is nothing from which he cannot save us. And that sets up a very tenuous storyline, even with the Watchmen characters. Those two things, where's Kovacs, where's Rorschach, and what powers does Superman have, are the two main things I want to watch for in this book.
So, spoiler alert. The story starts off with people rioting at Adrian Veidt, aka Ozymandias' building, because the world found out what Ozymandias did in order to ensure world peace. The world is on the brink of nuclear destruction between the United States and Russia. So Ozymandias is in hiding. He's also got a tumor, by the way, and he recruits the new Rorschach, who is black, and two random villains to go off and find Dr. Manhattan somehow. It's never explicitly stated how, but they're going to go off and find him. And then the story ends with a glimpse into the DC universe. Superman, Clark Kent, Kal-El, whatever you want to call him, is having a nightmare about his childhood and how his parents got killed in a car accident. He wakes up to find Lois Lane saying to him, "Sweetie, it seemed like you were having a nightmare there." And then the story ends with Superman saying, "That's the funny thing, Lois. I don't think I've ever had one before."
Thanks, Phil. I think you did a spectacular summary of the first issue. So I'm going to deviate slightly from our format. And rather than review what you just reviewed, I'm going to focus on my two initial expectations. The first off is Rorschach. So we know this isn't Walter Kovacs. Who is it? We don't know yet. So how does a character perform in the storyline? Is he faithful to what we already know about this very popular character? And I think he is. I slightly cringed when I heard an interview with Jeff Johns in which he said the changing of the character of Rorschach was done specifically for, quote, diversity, end quote. I wondered what we would have. Would they neuter him? Would his violence still be there? Would he remain the anti hero? And I believe he was successful.
Overall, I thought the story was pretty good. The writing and the artwork were both pretty solid, and they obviously seemed to emulate the Watchmen style pretty well, right down to the 9-panel grid structure, it was just excellent. And and overall, I just got a pretty good feel for it, and I'm kind of excited for more. But if there's one drawback that I had with this story, it's how it tried to segue into the DC universe. Now I understand that this is a DC and Watchmen crossover, but I think that the how they try to integrate the DC universe into the story could have been done maybe just a bit more smoothly. I mean, the fact that Superman has never had a nightmare before, it's just kind of baffling to me. He's in all of his years of existence, he's never once had a nightmare. I know that he's all powerful, but come on. Really? Criminy, this is starting to make me sympathize with the people who criticize the Martha thing from Dawn of Justice.
Thanks, Phil. This is Dave here with some concluding thoughts. Overall, I think this is a masterclass in how to do a mature introduction crossover series using very sensitive, very popular Watchmen material in the DC universe. I say mature because it still kind of harbors back to some adult language at times. The level of violence is graphic. However, speaking of graphic, the sequential art really helps the story flow. I like the ideas that are presented in an introduction #1 issue, and I'm only questioning now, with the use of Superman having nightmares, does that introduce new weaknesses or vulnerabilities that he may have to face Dr. Manhattan? I think these questions lead to more questions, which is the perfect setup for an ongoing series. I only wonder, will this relaunch DC into more new #1s or a new relaunch to remain competitive? And there you have it, cool fans. Our review and critiques of the Doomsday Clock #1 from DC Comics, a crossover using their new property, The Watchmen. We think this is a good pickup for fans who are loving The Watchmen, want to know what direction their heroes will take, and is a good chance to start to learn more about how the other DC characters from the Rebirth saga will continue on. We'll see you soon for our next week's review. In the meantime, stay cool.